Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just while we're settling in and up here, I'm very delighted to be with you tonight. And we thought before we get to the meat of the evening in the Stella Awards and keep you on tenterhooks about who's won and whether you love them, loathe them, or in fact are them, that we'd let a bit of daylight in on magic about our business in media. So it was my great pleasure to ask Jo Carr to join me. Jo is, I think, by popular acclaim, one of the most intelligent executives working at the BBC and indeed in television anywhere. And you will certainly, if you don't know Jo already, you will certainly have spent time engaged. Really, some of the best content that I've seen made factually has come out of the work that Jo does with her teams. Not just engaged in the sense that we all enjoy and should watch current affairs in a turbulent and changing world, but it's really the variety, I think, and the inspiration and the imagination that goes into bringing that to life while audiences have changing appetites and different needs that I want to focus on with Jo tonight. So I did ask Jo on the way out about her greatest hits, which went on for quite a while, actually. So I boiled them down in recent, and I think, Jo, you can please add to this. If you think what it takes to commission the Al Fayed story for Panorama. Panorama is one of your... Not a Panorama, I've already got that wrong. It was a separate production, while looking after Panorama, while winning a BAFTA for the Shamima Begum story, which I think made massive impact also in its podcast, which made me very happy and very envious at the same time as someone who has podcasting. I think there's just such an extraordinary range and depth of taking on difficult topics and at the same time just building those kind of repeat habit hits like Americast that bring audiences up to the moment for reasons which we all know feel somewhat at the front of mind now about understanding America and how the transatlantic relationship is emerging. So that was just a very quick greatest hits. So Jo, I wanted to start by asking, you've been in the BBC a long time. I first encountered you, I think, when you were doing PM and managing the unmanageable Eddie Mair with great panache and warmth. I mean, how do you think that the way you approach commissioning and formats has changed in the time that you've been doing it at this very senior level?
Well, I think it's changing all the time, and I think everybody would understand that. Audience habits are changing all the time. The context in which audiences need information is changing all the time. On demand has upended everything. Short form has upended everything. But to Jamie's theme of the evening, I suppose what I'll say, if there's anything that the success of the streamers has taught us, is that for my world, long form is still a really important way to engage audiences. And I think the difference between what I do and what my brilliant colleagues who make news bulletins do, that is quite a utility-based need for audiences. Sorry, I'll try not to say utility-based needs and phrases like that too much tonight.
No, don't sex it up too much.
But if people choose to commit, just keep calm, everybody. But if people choose to spend like 60 or 90 minutes of their leisure time watching something that we've made, that's generally because they really care about it or they're very engaged by it. So I think there's a sort of depth of relationship, again, without sounding too pompous, which is really meaningful and not to be taken lightly. But, the world moves very, very quickly. So even 5 years ago, I had more volume. I worked with more reporters. Now we're looking to co-produce a lot more because we need the money to go further and because, we're looking for premium storytelling, and a lot of that you will know in this room, you need premium directors, you need premium editors, you've got to find the budget to find the right people to tell the right story. We know that audiences tastes have moved, or maybe I was going to say audience tastes have moved away from kind of model of, informed reporter with microphone in hand tells you what you need to understand about any given subject. But maybe audiences never really liked that. Maybe it's actually more that there's more out there that's actually to their taste. But things have certainly moved towards experiential and sort of human, different human perspectives on things. So it's changing all the time, and just when you think you've understood something, you see something else amazing. So I watched the Zelensky story recently, which I was a bit behind on, and it was just a small thing, but they opened with cinema style credits. What on a documentary, sort of cinema style credits at the start. So from a small innovation to large.
Please, audience, don't take against two people sitting on a stage holding microphones after that analysis. But what's the difference then? I think a lot of people who want to get commissioned or have an interest in where it would fit in their just curiosity or might fit in their business model. What's the difference between coming and saying, I've got an issue that I really want to highlight and I know a lot about it and I've got the right people, and storytelling? Because I still think other people are quite confused about that, because we think of storytelling as a mode, but the thing that it's about as separate. But I don't get the impression that you think in those buckets in the way that maybe I did when I was starting out doing broadcast journalism.
Yeah, I think identifying issues is really easy. I get endless pitches, which is, things are very bad with mental health, or, the water company system, or Ukraine, or whatever. I mean, it's current affairs. It's sort of, I always say the source material for current affairs is publicly available because it's the news. So it's like any fool can identify an issue. But how do you slice into that in a way that's going to engage the audience? How do you slice into that in a way that's going to bring some unique insight? That's one of the questions I ask. What is the unique insight that this will bring? And that can be a whole range of things. Sometimes it's format. It's less often format in my world. But take Ukraine, which I think is particularly tricky because, obviously it's brutal. It's quite difficult to watch a lot of the time. It's been stalemated for a while. Audiences definitely felt an urgent need to understand more about it at the start of the conflict. That's died away. And we've done quite a lot of good long form. We had a great film called Ukraine, The People's Fight from Ollie Lambert, which was fantastic and really moving. And we had a couple of panoramas, one on Mariupol and one on the children of Ukraine. And so I felt like, from a portfolio point of view, and I look after Ukrainecast as well, so I felt pretty well set in terms of, having covered Ukraine. And then Jamie Roberts, who's a director that we'd worked with, and he'd made Escape from Kabul for us, which was about the withdrawal from Kabul airport and a few other things besides. And we were just chatting to him about what he would like to do next, and he was very interested in doing something on Ukraine, and I was a bit sceptical, as I say, it was what's the way in? And Jamie was talking off his own bat to various Ukrainian regiments, brigades, I'm not quite sure what the exact military term would be, and he got access to quite a lot of them, which is really hard because the Ukrainian brass obviously don't necessarily want people running around at the front line. And really, sadly and awfully, there was a lot of access that just fell away because they were being killed too quickly to make a film. I mean, awful, brutal considerations. But Jamie developed this amazing technique because the Ukrainians, they go to the front line for 72 hours and then they come back to their base and they have 3 days of relative R&R, where they just eat and get warm and get checked out. And Jamie gave them all GoPros. So again, to your point about things that change, the quality of GoPros has just massively increased. The the quality of our undercover footage on Panorama is unrecognisable from a few years ago. So, a whole world of possibilities opens up. Watch out, Anne. Undercover, Politico, coming soon.
What could possibly go wrong?
But Jamie gave the soldiers GoPros, didn't need much training. But the crucial thing was he was interviewing them as soon as they came back from the front line because they were they were seeing so much traumatic stuff that if he didn't talk to them in that 72 hours after they'd come back from the front, they couldn't remember anything. So he was doing the interviews, and of course that was, to Jamie's point about safety, I mean, that was a bit of a hair-raising risk assessment, but Jamie wasn't at the front line, but he was quite near. So he was interviewing these soldiers and then had a brilliant editor, Kate Spanky, brilliantly named, brilliant editor, and she just took these massive rushes and made a narrative out of it and came up with this amazing film, which everybody who watched it sort of really leaves a mark on. So I didn't set out wanting to commission anything extra on Ukraine, and I wasn't really sure that Jamie's idea would work, but I had faith in him, and he had a vision and he could see a way through to tell a modern story in a really difficult environment.
And how much of this is a strategy? Because it sounds you've already, just name-checked so many sort of different things that your head is in. And you threw in Ukrainecast. I mean, there's also the other iterations, of course. There's podcasting, there's other ways of telling stories that are not just, well, you either get your 45 minutes on the BBC or you don't. But how much do you think strategically about this? And how much do you, when you go through that pile of submissions, do you go with your gut? I mean, is there still a role? I mean, in a sense, if it's completely strategic, can't you be replaced by an AI sometime soon? And how much of gut instinct and feeling still goes into commissioning?
I'm sure I will be replaced by AI soon. I'm very confident about that. But my one-word answer, by the way, is Fleabag. I just, how could AI ever commission Fleabag? So that's my one-word argument about AI. Don't have anything else to say on that. No, I mean, what I try and do is, and I think probably everybody in the room would recognise this, you really want to leave space for your creative instinct, don't you? And for the thing that walks in the door and those sort of stubborn feelings that you can't quite let go on. And sometimes they go on for years. I've just commissioned somebody I used to work with to make a programme that he has literally been trying to make for 20 years, and it's finally going to happen. So he's happy. But you have to be dry-eyed about what you're going to do. And obviously in an organisation like the BBC, Tim Davies got these 3 strategic priorities, pursuing the truth with no agenda, bringing people together, backing the best of British storytelling. So you've already got a set of 3 tests there that you can run any idea against. And sometimes that's helpful. And then in something like current affairs, which, is... I was once introduced to, we have all these subgenres at the BBC, and I was once introduced to the head of popular factual. So I was able to say, I'm the head of unpopular factual. It's just good to know your place. So you're not always going to reach a massive audience, but what I will try and do is there are some things that I will commission because I think they can reach a broad mainstream audience. There are some things that I will commission because I think they build and support our reputation in some way, because I think it's an important subject, because editorially it's on point, because creatively it's an interesting risk, and you would hope that would be recognised with an award, much like this one.
when it all goes to plan.
I have very mixed feelings about awards, but they're nice. And by the way, Jamie's film is up for a Rose d'Or, so that's...
Then you won't have mixed feelings if you win it.
Yeah.
So sometimes awards are the fairest thing on the planet.
Well, sometimes it's trying to reach a broad audience. Sometimes it's reputational, and sometimes it's massive news impact. And then sometimes, and I haven't really thought of a good shorthand for this, but sometimes it's just about analytical depth on a story that the audience are really interested in. So a sleeper hit we had this summer, we made a programme in 2 parts about Mohammed bin Salman. And, it was a good film. It didn't break any massive news lines. I don't think it'll win awards, which isn't necessarily a reflection on the film, but, there's a particular kind of thing that wins awards. But the business that film has done on iPlayer, and the business it did when we turned it into a long-form article for BBC News under the new brand In Depth, it was astonishing. I mean, it's on something like 1.7 million iPlayer requests across the series, and that's on top of a very decent linear audience. So there's some... But again, I think that goes back to the difference between story and issue, because MBS is a story, this ruthless prince.
Yeah.
Ruthless prince, but telling you something about the world and how you exercise power and the limits of international diplomacy. I could go on. I'm just going to stop.
And also
said too many.
Also with a way of dealing with journalists who cross him. So you might not be taking your next holiday there.
There's a whole list of places I can't go on holiday.
Speed along to get the evening going. I mean, I have to be a bit naughty and ask you, what about your misses? I mean, do you know when something has missed the mark? Because in a way you've said, well, sometimes its audience could be big, or sometimes audience could be big in a different way in 3 different channels. So when do you look at yourself honestly and say, well, actually that one just didn't work, and what do you learn from that? Yeah. It's going to have to be a bit of a speed date. This one's right.
Oh, I can whiz through the failures very quickly. No, all easy. All the time. And sometimes it's timing. Sometimes something seemed amazing when you commissioned it, and 6 months down the line, it just doesn't really feel... Because current affairs has got to feel urgent. We've got a really good film coming out in a couple of weeks about Iran, but I don't think it will feel urgent for the audience in a way that ideally, you do want to. Sometimes you commission the difficult second album, and doesn't quite work. So we placed a big bet on a series called Bradford on Duty. And it was because we'd had a series which was on the eve of the pandemic, which was called Cops Like Us, and it was cops in Stoke-on-Trent. And the thing is, they were really funny. You know, they were great characters. They were really engaging. It was really watchable. There was plenty of light and shade. You know, so again, quite difficult to achieve in current affairs sometimes, but, you know, told you something about what's going on in the UK. And it went out in March 2020 when a lot of people were staying at home and wanting to watch the telly. So it had lots of charm, lots of energy, lots of pace. And we thought, great, you know, let's go bigger and better. So we commissioned this big, really quite ambitious thing, which was about all the public services in Bradford and how they work together. And we commissioned it at 5 parts. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad series, but it didn't fly. There was just something, it was a slightly different editor. The characters were slightly different. It just didn't quite, you know, I think of it like the ting of the wine glass. It's just like, you know when you got it and you know when you haven't. But, sorry, I know you want to hurry. I'm just going to give my favourite quote ever about creativity. So Powell and Pressburger said, magic being what it is, you can never predict where the magic will land. You can only prepare the nests and hope a little magic slides into it.
Before I let you go, I can't let you go. The only reason I was really rushing you along, because we're not looking at Jamie, is giving me a timing, and I promise I'll be quick. We've got to talk a tiny bit, very quickly. Just give me one example of how use of newer formats, new media goes. And I was thinking about TikTok, and an unlikely TikTok star, and in just a minute style, you're going to tell the story.
Yes, I am. So this is to the question of, you know, is short form eating long form? Can anybody watch anything that's longer than 1 minute 30? To which the answer might end up being no. But Chris Mason, our wonderful political editor, I heard him, it was actually, this is very meta, because I heard this on Newscast, and it was actually from 5 Live earlier in the day, but he was trying to do live maths about the Tory leadership and what would happen when 3 went down to 2 and how many votes would you need in an electorate of 121, which is actually a harder question than it seems on the surface. And Chris, being Chris, because he's got this wonderful transparency, was sort of articulating how difficult this was. And I was listening to this and I was thinking, well, this is kind of what More or Less do, which is another programme that I look after for Radio 4. They're very keen on like maths you can use, back of an envelope maths they call it, you know, ways to think about maths in quick ways. So I said to More or Less, get Chris in and get him together with Rob Easterway, who wrote this brilliant book called Back of an Envelope Maths. And anyway, I saw they were recording and I got stopped by Chris Mason on the way. He said, Joe, what is 16% of 25? So I went, 20% would be 5, so it's probably a bit less than that. So it's probably just under 4, and 3.9. Thinking, oh, God. And then he said, OK, what's 25% of 16? 4. Right, amazing. Total life hack, changed my life. It's like saying 6 times 7 is the same as 7 times 6. You can reverse percentages. So we clipped this up. And we
How many people knew that?
Yeah, everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. But so we clipped it up and we put it on Instagram Reels. So not TikTok, but Instagram Reels. So that is currently on 3.7 million views.
Wow.
And when I told Chris Mason this last week, he said, that's interesting. He said, yeah, the policemen at Westminster, they've been shouting at me, Chris, what's 16% of 25? I said, and they never talk to me about politics. So I think that's, you know, if you can just pull out a snippet of news you can use, you can make short form work for if you're coming from a long form background. There you go.
Thank you very much. You've got an idea.